Hi everyone, it's Kerry back with you today. So today I'm going to be creating one of these altered clipboards. Now it's probably going to be a bit more of a craft with me rather than a tutorial, but I thought I would share the process with you and give you some alternatives on things that you might want to use in case you don't have a little clipboard to alter or that sort of thing. So we'll just have a quick look through first. So our bundle has a little clip on the side here with just some bits and pieces, like a little cluster, numbers, keys, little bits of fabric, that sort of thing. And the actual bundles are sort of broken up into two sections. So I've got this little section here which is all tied together, and this is sort of letters, postcards, some stamps, that sort of thing. And then underneath here I've got a selection of vintage ephemera papers, book pages, some printables, and some authentic vintage pieces, and I've just folded them in a way that they sort of give a bit more of a layered effect once they're clipped in. And then the clipboard itself was just a little masonite type clipboard which I've altered quite heavily with inks, some stamping and attaching some bits of paper. So I'll gather some bits and pieces and I'll show you how I've done that. So I'll quickly talk about the clipboard first. Now when I got these they were brand new, pristine, shiny, and I wanted to grunge them up. So to grunge up my clipboard I dunked it in a solution of tea, coffee and Parisian essence. Now I just dunked it in, I didn't soak it in there because this is just like a masonite, and if I'd left it in there it would have sort of swollen up and lost its shape, possibly even fallen apart. And then this darker colour was just some ink that I splashed on it while it was still wet, and then I've left it to dry. So that's how I've got the base. Now if you don't have a clipboard you could use something like an old book cover with a big bulldog clip. If you don't have that you could just use a piece of cardboard, recycled cardboard, and a bulldog clip. And if you don't have a bulldog clip you could simply punch a couple of holes and just use some twine or something like that instead, or in place of the bulldog clip. But I'm going to be working on the clipboard today. So after I'd grunged my clipboard and left it to dry, I wanted to add what looked like, an old chart or something that had been worn off with use. So I grabbed a piece of book page that had lots of numbers on, and then I've just torn around the edges, and I wanted to decide which side I want that down on. I don't really like that pointy bit, so I'm going to get rid of that. And I think I'll glue this side. Now I've just used glue stick to glue the majority of the base. And then I've added just a little bit of art glitter glue around the edges just to help glue those down properly. Now this looks very new compared to this one, so to grunge it up a little bit I grabbed a wet wipe, and I've just got some walnut stain oxide ink here, and I've just applied a little bit to the wet wipe. I'm just going to sort of mix it in a little bit there so it's not just in one big blob on my baby wipe, and then I've just gone over my book page image to give it a bit more of a vintage feel. Now by using that baby wipe on here it's kind of dampened the page a little bit, and I've just got this sanding block. I'm just going to very lightly go over the edges, and that just sort of wears away some of the print and also blends the edges in a little bit more with the back of the clipboard. And if pieces come off, I don't mind that. I think it adds to the vintage feel of it. So once I've done that, I actually take my glue stick and I'm just going to rub around the edges of the book page with the glue stick. This helps re-adhere any sort of rough bits that have come up. And then again I use my baby wipe and I sort of blend that glue in with some of the ink. Alright, so I'll need to leave that to dry properly before I turn it over. So in the meantime, I'm going to start adding some stamping on here. Now some of these stamps I can't tell you where they're from or who they're by because I got them at a garage sale years ago, and it doesn't have any labels on, but it's just like a old German script. I just want a bit of that to show up in the background. And then I also have this measuring tape one, and again I can't tell you where this one is from because I got it from a craft fair and it has no labels on, and I got it years ago, so I don't even know if it's still available. And I'm not going to use an acrylic block because I want it to be imperfect. Alright, so on the front of my clipboard here, I've taken this Andy Skinner stamp, this one here, and this is from a set called Steampunk. It's got a clock in it as well, but I don't know where the clock is. But it had this sort of circuit mesh looking piece, so I thought that looked kind of industrial. So I'm just going to pop this one on a block. I'm using VersaFine Clear ink for this because it's a permanent ink, so if I choose to put some wet medium on it, it's not going to run. But also I find the VersaFine Clear ink gives a very crisp impression. And I'm just sort of putting it here and there wherever I think it's suitable for no real reason at all. So I think that'll do for that one. Now next I want to create this big sort of number thing here, and for that I'm using these Tim Holtz upper and lowercase cling foam stamps. Now these are awesome and they're pretty underrated if you ask me. They stamp really crisply and they're very easy to create your own sort of clusters. So put my A there. Now if you're not confident putting them on backwards, you can always lay them out as you want them to be. Let's just move these forward. So you could lay it out upside down as you would like it to be and then pick it up with your foam block. Not your foam block, sorry, your acrylic block. So that's how it will look when I stamp it. Just going to pick those up with my block. And of course when I turn it round they're up the other way. Oops, put these on upside down. Now if you're having trouble getting your your stamps to stick to your acrylic block, you can use a little bit of glue stick or a little bit of double-sided tape. Just going to put a tiny bit of glue stick on here because this dot doesn't want to stick. Try again. Still doesn't want to stick. Okay, we'll just do one dot at a time. So I can pop that there like that. And then take this one that doesn't want to stick. and just pop that there like that. Okay, so then I've also taken a little piece of scrap paper and I've just glued that on here. Then I've come in with my ink brush and just grunge that right up. So it looks like it's been on there for a bit. And then I've just taken one of the number stamps from the documented stamp set. Now I picked up these old office stamps again. It was either a thrift store or a garage sale, something like that. And these make really cool backgrounds on vintage bits and pieces. So I've just added some of this stamping using these office stamps. There we go, just adds a little bit more interest. So that's pretty much the base completed. Now you can add as much or as little as you like to this. You could add some more tickets and printable bits and pieces to make it look like it's had things stuck on it, labels. But I'm just going to leave it like that for now because most of it I'm going to cover up with my paper bundle. So the next thing I did was gathered some bits and pieces that I wanted to include on my clipboard, and I've used a mixture of authentic vintage bits and pieces and also some printed bits and pieces, but you could use whatever you like. You could use book pages, you could use printables, you could use things that you've torn out of old magazines or newspapers, anything just to make an interesting stack. And I think what helps make it interesting is when you layer up the pieces. So my first piece was a large piece of old French document, and I wanted the base piece to cover most of the clipboard, just show a little bit around the edges. So when I clip that in there, I can still see a little bit all the way around the clipboard. And then basically I've taken all of my bits and pieces and folded them according to the next step in the layer. So I've added this one next, and again I've just folded the edge of it up so that it's giving me this layered look. And then I just went on throughout the stack of papers, folding them and tucking them in, making sure I was happy with how the stack was looking. Now, when it came to the next layer, these will actually cover up some of my lower layers, but I don't think that matters particularly because it will give it some depth as well, so that when you're flicking through you can still see the different layers. But what I wanted to do with these printed pieces was make sure that they weren't all folded in the same way. So this one's just been folded in half. This one I've actually folded into three, and I've left the stamp and the words poking out. And then another one just folded in half, and then another one folded into three. And when I actually stack them up on my pile, I kind of try to make sure that I've got just a little bit of each one poking out, even if it's just the tiniest sliver. It shows the colour, and I think it just helps make the pile look interesting on the clipboard. So you can sort of see a little bit of this green poking out here, and then a little bit of this blue poking out on the other side. Now you're going to cover things up as you build up the stack, but it all adds to it at the end. So then I just kept going through adding my bits and pieces to create interest within the stack. So now I've got all of my bits of paper, my paper ephemera, clipped in, and I want to create like a topper for the top of my clipboard. So I've used some old letters, and I've created some sort of faux stamped bits and pieces to create like a little letter stack. But something else that I think would look kind of cool is this is from our November freebie for our collaboration with the Playing with Paper and Glue Facebook group. I will leave a link in the description box below to where you can get this freebie. And I've done a video on how I created this little paper stack, and I'll link that below as well. If you are not part of the Facebook group, or if you don't do Facebook, the freebie will be available in the shop on the 1st of December. So I think this would also look kind of cool, just tucked in on top of the paper stack if you didn't want to do like a little letter bundle. So I'll just leave that one aside and I'll show you what I did with the letter bundle. So what I've got here are some vintage letters. This is a printable from, I think it's a correspondence kit 2. But again, there's loads of printable envelopes available out there that you could use if you don't have access to the actual vintage envelopes. And again, I want to make a little layered stack for these to tie together. So I like that this one's nice and big, and I want to put this airmail envelope on top of it because I love the edge of this. So I'm going to stick that on top there. Now this is a vintage French postcard, and rather than have the picture showing, I'm just going to layer it up with the writing showing. And then I'm going to take this printable, and I selected this one just because I like the colour. I think the pop colour just adds something to it. So I'm just going to quickly cut this one out. Okay, so I've cut and scored my little envelope there. So that can go onto our stack. And then I've just taken a piece of, I think this was actually a scrap of pianola paper, but you could use a piece of brown packing paper. If you've got old envelopes, you could just use those. And I just wanted to create a little, look like a piece that's been torn off an old envelope sort of thing. So I've got a couple of vintage stamps here, and again, if you don't have vintage stamps, there's loads available as printables. We have some on the November freebie. There are some stamps. There are stamps in the correspondence collection, but there'll be loads of stamps out there, printable ones. So I'm just going to bring in the glue book. And then I'm just going to take this little postmark stamp from the documented stamp set. I'll ink it up, but then I'll stamp it off first and then stamp it onto my stamps. So that's giving us an interesting looking stack, and I'm just going to grab a paper clip and some string. So I'm just going to clip everything together with a paper clip just to help hold it all together. And then I've got a piece of jute twine here, and I'm just going to wrap it round and tie it up. So the last thing I want to work on is the little clip that I've got here on the side with all of our little bits and pieces. So again, I've gathered some things that I'll need. I've just got a couple of pieces of rusted fabric. I've got a little ball chain, a scrap piece of cardboard, one of these Tim Holtz number tiles, and then I've taken this picture from one of the vintage people kits, and I'm just going to cut out this gentleman's head to pop onto my little chipboard scrap here. So the first thing I want to do is age my chipboard a little bit. Now I really like this chipboard because when you distress the edge, it's sort of got this real vintage feel about it. The edge goes kind of thick. It's hard to explain, but hopefully you can sort of see what's happening there. And then I'll need my picture. So I'm just going to roughly cut that out. And then I need to make it a little bit smaller all the way around. I'm just going to grunge him up a little bit as well. I'm just using glue stick. So I've got one of these little, it's actually a picture hanger, and I'm going to use it to make a hangy spot on my little charm. I'll just add a little bit of glue. Then I'm just going to press it closed with some pliers. Then I'll pop a little bit more glue under my picture here. And for the back, I'm just going to use a piece of scrap paper that I've got here. There we go. So we've got our gentleman on one side and just some writing, vintage writing sort of thing on the other side. So he's looking a little bit naked around the edge there, so I think I'll just add some stamping. So I might just do it in brown because I don't want it to stand out too much. There we go. So I'll need to punch a hole in this little acetate number. And I think I just want that dangling from the corner. So to finish off the little cluster, I've got a couple of metal bits from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to thread everything through onto my ball chain. And lastly, I've got one of these little hinge clips, so I'll thread that on there as well. And I need to cut my chain down a little bit because it's too long. So I'll figure out roughly how long I need it to be. Then I'll just cut the excess off. And to finish off, I'm going to add the little pieces of fabric just with a pin. And just clip that at the back of my little cluster there, so that's sort of hanging down behind. And then I can just attach that on there like that. So now we have a completed little altered clipboard paper bundle there, and I think that looks pretty cool. So there we go. I absolutely love putting these together. I think they're so much fun, and I think they look really great all layered up they look nice and interesting, and lots of things to flick through and have a look at. So of course, if you use printables or genuine ephemera, then you can always pull this apart and use it to make other bits and pieces as well, which I think is great. So I hope you found that inspiring, and I hope that maybe you'll have a go at putting one of those together for yourself. Don't forget that the freebie is available for this one in the Playing with Paper and Glue Facebook group, and it will be available in the shop on the 1st of December, and I think this would look awesome on top of all of that bundle as well. So thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you again next time. Bye.